host, Ethan Allen, and you're here with us on Likeable Science here on Think Tech Hawaii. Welcome. And good to have people here. Good to see you. My guest here, Bill Richardson. Nice to have you here, Bill. Bill is with the Tech Transfer Office. He's interim director of Tech Transfer here at UH, and just heard him speaking yesterday at a Think Tech downtown forum on sovereignty. But we're going to talk about something more closer to what he does for his regular job here this time, and it's very exciting. You know, one of the premises of Likeable Science is we want to get spread the word that science really impacts people's lives in good, positive ways, and a tech transfer office is a great way to do that. I mean, that's it takes all these great ideas that maybe scientists develop in the lab in a university and helps them move them out and get them into production and out into people's lives. So it's a valuable tool here. So what's one of the hot tech transfer things that's happened recently?
Well, University of Hawaii has over $400 million in research done every year, so it's quite a big research facility. And I guess the sexy ideas are sometimes the best to display publicly, but we have a professor named John Mady who was the original discoverer and builder of the free electron laser when he was at Duke University. Okay. Since then, since his Duke days, he spent some time at Stanford, and now we have him here at Hawaii, and he's looking into communications, believe it or not, that could be potentially faster than light. So, you know, unless you see a professor with his kinds of credentials, you kind of look sideways at a professor like that. But he has the credentials. He's a world-famous physicist, and he's developing some pretty spectacular technology.
Excellent. Faster than light. That's amazing. So, like you hear me before I've actually said it then.
Well, theoretically, if you can travel faster than light, you can go back in time.
Right. There we go. Yeah. Amazing. That's certainly interesting, and we'll see how that transfers out. Right.
Right.
Wonderful. But it's fascinating to see how many good ideas have come out of universities and how these have impacted the world. I heard it said once that if you took the top dozen folks who came through under the GI Bill and took some of the ideas that they have developed, that the money they've poured into the U.S. economy would more than pay for all the expenses the GI Bill cost over its whole lifespan. You know, so it's great how this kind of stuff can really.
I might comment on that because I think it's a bit of a fallacy for universities to think that they're actually going to make money from the technologies that they develop. If you look at the technology transfer offices throughout the country, especially at public universities, fewer than 10% of the universities actually make money. So it's more of a community-wide effort to develop both an entrepreneurial spirit, a entrepreneurial community, diversify the economy. So it's more than just trying to make money out of the universities. But yes, universities do make money. I don't think the University of Hawaii has ever made money. I'm not sure that, I think we should have. So it's a theory I want to debunk a little bit.
Yeah, no, I wasn't sort of saying make money from the university. I was saying it had actually sort of generated that much economic growth.
Yes, exactly. It does have a huge economic impact on your community if you do it right.
Because yes, if the ideas stay just in a lab in a small circle of scientists, they typically don't really get out and do anything. But you get a good idea, like the sticky notes, and that goes from being just a small obscure development to being something that's in
sure. If you look at most of the successful universities that have tech transfer offices, it really comes down to one technology. Stanford has two. They had monoclonal antibodies and Google. But something like WARF, which is Wisconsin, had rat poison. University of Florida had Gatorade. University of Washington had Nike. So you've heard of all these big, huge companies, but they're few and far between. And most universities just plug along and try and leverage the economic engine of the university and their communities.
Okay. I was talking on the show last year at one point with a guy from Stanford who's has developed the 50-cent microscope. He's actually developed a microscope that costs about 50 cents to manufacture. It's a 1,000-power scope. You can carry it in your pocket. You can throw it down on the floor, you can stick it underwater. Tremendously valuable thing. Every kid in the world could essentially walk around with a microscope in a pocket. Just think of the implications for science education for that.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. But so how does this whole process work though? How does tech transfer? What does the tech transfer office really do, and how do they do it?
Well, from a sort of a basic view, basically we sit in our office and wait for a professor in the university to file what we call a disclosure. We then react to that technology, do a little bit of market research.
So a disclosure is like, hey, I've come up with this great thing.
Hey, this is the description. Usually it's an academic paper.
Okay.
And we take a look at it. We do some market analysis. We look at whether or not somebody will pay for this. We look through our database to see if there's a number of interested parties that we've had past contact with. And then we file a patent if necessary. And that takes about 1 year for a provisional patent. And then we have to spend the money to do a full non-provisional patent. In that case, then if we do get a patent issued, we look to the industry for potential licensees, or we have a small program here at the University of Hawaii, which I call Entrepreneurs in Residence. And they will take that technologies and run with it and hopefully build a company around it. And my view is that we should all try. And most of us should fail, but you learn a lot more from failure than you do from success in most cases.
Absolutely.
And it's a matter of volume and numbers. And so the more you have, the better off you are.
All right, so now I was just talking a few weeks ago with Song Choi here, the Associate Dean of Engineering, and he was talking about the Fab Lab, where the students get in and actually start making stuff.
Well, the iLab.
The iLab, and
Yes.
I guess the Fab Lab is part of that, or and again, it seems like that might have, some of those ideas might eventually wend their way into your...
Absolutely. I mean, when you get a lot of smart people in one place talking about different ideas, things happen.
Yeah. I mean, and you see these technologies now on the market that just a few years ago were just an idea in someone's head.
Well, it's based on the garage philosophy of Stanford and their design school, and put a lot of smart people together in one place, and sooner or later you get a good idea.
Indeed. It's interesting when you, particularly one of the great arguments, of course, for having very diverse teams working on it is you don't want a bunch of people who all think exactly the same. You want people who think in very different ways about projects and products and processes, so they stimulate each other and question each other's assumptions and really can move things forward then. Excellent. So how long has Hawaii had a tech transfer office?
Well, I don't want to get into it too much, but it's been in existence for over 30 years.
Oh, okay.
The problem at the University of Hawaii is they've had long stints of maybe 4 or 5 years of not having a director. So it's been a situation where you ramp up, then somebody leaves, and you get a dead spot for quite a few times. So the revenue streams are not comparable to the mainland. And to not criticize too much, prior to my coming there, a $400 million revenue university should have about $5 million in revenue. If you compare it to a Stanford, it's probably not fair to compare to Stanford, but Stanford has about $100 million in revenue. Comparable universities that have $300 or $400 million in research usually have between $3 and $5 million in revenue. When I came to the University of Hawaii, which is about 13 months ago, we had 75,000.
Wow.
And so the effort is to, first of all, build up the number of disclosures and get trust built back up between the Technology Transfer Office and the faculty, the research faculty. And the second part of that is to bring in new people that have much more marketing expertise and company building expertise. So I've started on trying to fulfill the needs of the office, and we're moving forward. I must say that I think I was hired to be an agent of change, but the change within the university is difficult.
Yes, I've noticed that throughout the whole educational system, which is it's a real irony, right? Education is all about change.
Should be.
And as an enterprise, it is one of the most hidebound, conservative, inertia-laden enterprises that you'll ever see, which is really rather odd. But no, it's great to hear. I hadn't realized that. I always somehow think of tech transfer offices as being a fairly new phenomenon. I grew up around universities, but I never really heard of them until.
No, the federal statute that created this is at least 50 years old.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's been around for a long time.
I guess just my own shortcomings.
Yeah.
So, and what are in the past? What are some of the historic transfers that have happened here from Hawaii?
Well, again, it's a bit of a jaded history. Very people realized that when the internet was first being created, there was a very highly thought of professor named Norm Abramson. Mm-hmm. He had developed what's called the Aloha protocol, and it's actually the signaling channel that's integrated into the Novell networks, and all of the packets that flow throughout the world in information packets have a little tail on them called the Aloha protocol. Uh-huh. And what happens when you distribute, say you want to send a message to your daughter in California, it gets disassembled and it gets a little tag put on it, and then it goes through the internet any way that it can get there. But the signaling channel is what tells the computer that's receiving it how to reassemble the message. Huh. So you get these little 8-bit messages. They go all the way through the internet any way they can get there, and then they're reassembled on the other side. That's called the Aloha protocol. Uh-huh.
And that was
a technology developed at the University of Hawaii. A bunch of surfers that came here to code and surf. And you know, if you, I think I did the calculation a long time ago, but if you had 1,000th of a cent per packet license on that, you'd be richer than the United States.
All right. So. Shoot, they didn't do that probably.
And the other big one was, again, that one was never patented. It was actually in the public domain. The second one was, if some of you recall in the audience, there's a professor named Yanagi Machi here at the University of Hawaii who did the green mice. And he was, at the time, by far the leading expert in fertility in the world. And we had an opportunity to build a huge facility here. Everyone in fertility wanted to come here. But a long story, a bunch of politics and an inactive OTED office at that time really caused some problems, and it ended up in a lawsuit. And by the time the lawsuit was completed and finished, the opportunity had passed.
Anyhow, we're going to go to a short break here, but we'll be back to talk further. I got Bill Richardson here from the UH Office of Technology Transfer, and we're gonna dig into the guts of that business a little more deeply when we come back. We'll be back in a moment.
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. My name is Anu Hittel, and I host a show, Climate Change Beyond Outrage. In it, we go beyond outrage to look at solutions to climate problems facing people, nations, and the world. Join me every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Hawaii Standard Time. See you then.
Okay, I'm Jay Fidel, that's Ray Starling. We co-host a show called Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, every Wednesday, 4 to 5 p.m. It's really interesting. You know, Ray has a way of unzipping these guys. He asks them these questions and all this stuff tumbles out, and we find out stuff we would never know about without Ray's questions. Thank you, Ray.
You're welcome, Jay. I'm very pleased to be your Ed McMahon every Wednesday at 4 o'clock here on the internet. So you can join us and see what's happening in the energy world, and there is a lot going on. So join us every Wednesday at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, come around, be energized right here on Think Tech. Aloha.
Good afternoon, and we're back here, Likeable Science. I'm your host, Ethan Allen. With me today in the Think Tech studios is Bill Richardson from the UH Office of Tech Transfer, and we were just laughing about off-the-wall scientists here. He was talking about the qualities in somebody who heads up a tech transfer office, and they need to be able to deal not only with the off-the-wall scientists, but with the attorneys and have the legal expertise and the marketing know-how and the business background and the company startup and all that kind of good stuff. So it sounds like it takes many talents. So, what is it?
If any of you are out there, I'm looking to hire right now.
What is it that really brings you into work each day, that you really love about this work? It sounds like you are actually very uniquely qualified for it.
Well, I think I've come to this job from a very different perspective in many cases. Most tech transfer officers come up through the ranks and they develop their skill sets in marketing in a specific technology arena, and then they learn how to talk to professors and translate their ideas into commercial ideas. I did the almost exact opposite. I was always on the buy side of technology as a venture capitalist. So in 1993, I returned to Hawaii from working on the mainland to start a series of small venture capital funds. And I was probably one of the loudest critics of the technology transfer office at the University of Hawaii, because I used to think of it as the technology stopper in everything that was developed at the university. And it was a very difficult office to interact with at that time. So I complained about it for, almost 20 years. And when I retired from my venture funds in 2015, I was happily retired at home, and a number of the people at the university came to me and said, you've been complaining about that for a long time. Why don't you come over and fix it?
All right.
So basically I said, okay, you got 3 years. I'll come over and do what I can. And so here I am. I had in my previous work, I think we licensed 3 different technologies from the University of Hawaii, none of which made us a lot of money, although one of them was a very great idea that went pretty far. So I've seen it from both sides.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Because that's a really interesting point you bring up. So, sort of what's in it from the research scientist point of view? Well, why should they bother sort of spending their time and energy dealing with a tech transfer office? What does it get them?
Well, and that's a good question. I think that many faculty members teach for teaching's sake. Many research faculty research for research sake as well. But there's a small number of researchers that also hear the stories and see the great wealth that's created by some of their peers and want to do that. And those are the professors we're looking for. We hopefully have the expertise now at the office to help them with their connections, validating of their science, building prototypes, adapting their science to the real market, and building that kind of situation. So it's probably the promise of wealth, although it could be the promise of changing the world.
Okay, yeah. No, and both of those can be strong motivators, right?
Perfectly, yeah.
I had the good fortune for a number of years to work with Leroy Hood. I don't know if that name means
it does.
Okay.
It does in the pharmaceutical area.
Right, and Lee was one of those people apparently who, as a young researcher, realized there's no reason we have ranks of graduate students sitting here hand pipetting tons of reagents out to do this gene finding, gene editing, or gene searching at that point. And a lot of this is really rote stuff that a machine should be able to do just as well or better, and helped then to develop some of those early machines, and apparently had a good tech transfer office because did pretty well out of it.
Lee Hood was at Stanford, right?
I think he was at Caltech, actually.
Oh, Caltech in Southern California.
Right.
I've heard his name because there's another scientist here who is actually responsible for the monoclonal antibodies at Stanford. That's very good friends with Lee Hood.
Oh, okay.
And they're brilliant people.
Yeah, amazing. And you never know what technology is going to sort of leap off and take off. I had the fun of talking with another Stanford scientist a bit ago who has developed scaled up gecko feet, if you know what I mean. That is,
so you can run across water and you can walk up walls?
Yeah, literally this guy can actually climb glass walls with essentially these pads on his hands and feet.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it seems like there ought to be something to do with that.
I don't know how many spiders we need in the world.
Well, I don't know. All the cat burglars in the world are going to need a set of these things.
There you go.
But then you actually really do in a tech transfer business. You're dealing with a bunch of different players who have very sort of different vested interests, right? Because yes, some people, the venture capitalists, are sort of at the one end looking like, we want to put money into this and make money out of this. And again, you're, I guess, you serve as sort of the key liaison, as it were, because oftentimes the research scientist really is not, by training, particularly well qualified to talk to a venture capitalist, right? But if you have almost a foot in both worlds, as it were, right, you can.
Well, that's an interesting point you make, because one of the things that I've noticed is engineers and scientists and lawyers and business people all speak 3 different languages. And it's very rare that they interact at a young age. So what I did is, for the last 10 years or so at the University of Hawaii Law School, I've taught a class called High Growth Entrepreneurship. And what we did is we took 10 engineers, 10 business people, and 10 lawyers, and we put them in the classroom, and we talked about developing large growth in companies. And we spent a lot of time learning to speak each other's language, because you'll find that the businessman says, yeah, we can do that. The lawyer says, no, we can't do that. And the engineer says, let me think about it. I think we can do that. And so unless they're all talking to each other and learn the language of each other, then it's a non-productive partnership.
Yeah, and yet it is at those intersections often where a lot of the really hot stuff now happens. So where I was at the University of Washington before I came out to Hawaii, they had a very interesting program where they would put their doctoral students, some of their doctoral students, in a chemical engineering program, working with physicians, and having these engineering type students suddenly being put in these clinical settings. And how do we solve this problem or that problem that we're having in a hospital? And again, they said the same kind of thing in that program. They spent a lot of their early time was trying to understand what the clinician was saying and the engineer was saying, and back and forth and back and forth.
They have a similar program at the University of Hawaii where there's an engineering professor that brings in 6 or 7 top engineering students, and basically they go to the medical school and ask them what their biggest problem is. So in that situation, they've discovered a metal that doesn't stick to tissue when heated. I mean, they've developed all kinds of. They have a crib that will slowly move preemie babies so that they don't have blood pooling. There's some interesting programs going on at the university about that.
Yeah.
Built on that premise that engineers should be talking to people that have problems.
Right, absolutely. But again, there's a peculiar richness to that dialogue when you really begin to get all those other sectors and segments, the business people, the venture capitalists, the attorneys, all of that. I mean, it's actually it's oddly reminiscent of when I used to work in the go off to these conferences from the Association of Science and Technology Centers. The Sci-Tech Centers always drew a very interesting group of people into their staff. So you'd have business people, you'd have scientists, you'd have educators, all looking at these same issues and facing these same challenges, but bringing their very different perspectives to bear on it. And
there's an interesting phenomenon that I've noticed just recently, and it's because of the internet, is that the social scientists, in many cases, were left out of the business development arena, and that's no longer true, because a lot of the social networking pieces and apps that are being built because of the availability of the internet are built on social science libraries. Communications, word meaning, translations, even human behavior. And so it will be interesting to see what the future is like when it comes to the social sciences.
Right.
It's not just the hard sciences anymore.
True, yeah. Social sciences are really, that distinction almost is being blurred now between some of the hard sciences. The issues that used to be sort of strictly regarded from a neuroscience standpoint, that's my background. Some of those now as social sciences are getting quite interestingly melded as we're discovering sort of what the neural correlates of some social interactions are and how people make judgments about things. And when you think you're being very rational about things, but you're really not being rational at all about them in many cases.
An interesting example of that here is social science had developed a library on emotional content of words, and they actually used that algorithm to determine whether people were potential terrorists. Because people that speak with very high passion words tend to be very high passion people, and those are the ones that can be, it's kind of a Brave New World kind of scary things, but they are using that to go through communications to find people that are potential terrorists.
Sure, and I mean, again, we can now search. We have, because of our computer and internet capabilities, we have the capabilities of digging deeply into a lot of multiple data sets and bringing that data all together.
Absolutely.
And seeing interesting patterns in it. So a friend of mine does that, looked at the issue of suicide among veterans of the war, of the wars, and found there were patterns in their past behaviors and their numbers of social worker visits and psychiatrist and psychologist visits and run-ins with law and all this kind of stuff. And was able then to sort of observe that you could use this not only retrospectively, but you could find people who had these same patterns now, and the obvious sort of implication is the military ought to be paying a lot more attention to these individuals and reaching out to them to help them, because they are presumably at higher risk.
And interestingly enough, it's actually going the other way. There are now tests being proven, validated, that you can do a blood test to find out if you have PTSD. So it's actually going the other way. It's very interesting how the chemicals of the human body interact to create social activity.
It is indeed. There's all kinds of interesting stuff. Now it turns out that the microbial community in the guts of chronically malnourished kids can basically inhibit growth if sort of infused into
and
normally growing
therapeutics are
kids.
being built around
right, and vice versa, of course,
no.
which is the better part. You can change these things around pretty. So yeah, and much of this stuff was developed in universities, presumably, at least at the early stages of it, and it's a good thing that's getting out there through, in many cases, tech transfer offices, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So are there universities that really don't do tech transfer these days? I mean, that don't have the formal offices? Or?
Well, there's an interesting thing that I've discovered since I've taken the job, is that every university, especially public universities, does exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. They get a disclosure, they look at the market validation, and then they do all the steps that everybody does exactly the same way. And the first thought came to me is, why is every university recreating this? Mm-hmm. And why aren't universities partnering with other universities to outsource a lot of this work? That's something I'm still thinking about. And I call University of Hawaii OTED Light, maybe a partnership with a larger university or a comparable sized university that has the infrastructure already built. And that we could then use their platforms as our distribution network. I think there's faculty union issues with that, and there's faculty relationship issues with that, but it doesn't make any sense for everybody to recreate the exact same model.
Absolutely.
And so I call that the University Light. I also, the OTED Light and the OTED Heavy would be more of a separate entity outside of the university, free of the conflict of interest rules and some of the legal constraints of spending other people's money, so that we could then make deals, and make deals fast, and that's what the business community requires.
Yes, okay. Right, so yeah, there are actually a number of ways that this business could be done, basically. And,
right.
Interesting.
But I think staying in the middle, the way the UH is doing it now, in my humble opinion, is silly.
So is that going to be one of your things you're going to push for?
I don't know if they'll let me. I'm kind of a wild man, so they look at me as kind of a wild man. So
okay, we'll come back and explore some of that wild nature of yours here after another break. Bill Richardson here from the UH Office of Tech Transfer. I'm your host, Ethan Allen. You're with us here on Likeable Science on Think Tech Hawaii.
Aloha, I'm Kaui Lucas, host of Hawaii is My Mainland, here on Think Tech Hawaii every Friday at 3 p.m. We address issues of importance for those of us who live here on the most isolated landmass on the planet. Please come join me Fridays at 3 p.m. Mahalo.
Hello, I'm Stephen Katz, and I'm the host of Shrink Wrap, which comes to you live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. on thinktechhawaii.com, and then it's repeated again whenever you want if you go to the website. On our show, we will be talking to all different kinds of therapists, psychologists, psychoanalysts, psychiatrists, people who talk about the mind, the brain, and about different ways to find happiness I myself am a marriage and family therapist in practice here in Hawaii, and I hope you will join us because I've got a lot to learn, you've got a lot to learn, and it's a great ride. Thanks a lot. See you soon.
I mean, even within our panelists.
And you're back here on Likeable Science. I'm your host, Ethan Allen. With me today in the Think Tech Studios is Bill Richardson from the UH Office of Tech Transfer. And we're talking about all the differences of kinds of models of tech transfer that different universities have used. But the world of technology transfer and sort of entrepreneurship is really much bigger than the university. Well, it's sort of, the university might be thought of as almost a feeder system for the entrepreneurial community in some sense, although it's certainly not the only place people come from. And Hawaii has certainly wrestled with the idea of technology and developing new technologies in different ways, and some would say has done less than a stellar job in encouraging technologies. So what's your take on this?
Well, to give you a little background, so in 1993, I started the first of my 3 venture funds, very small venture funds created in Hawaii based on the theory that if we had a local venture capitalist that had relationships with the California venture capitalists, that we could take some of our companies and create big businesses, real businesses. That theory worked. I mean, of 17 companies, 3 of them went public on the NASDAQ, so it was relatively successful. You know, you've heard of Digital Island or Hoku Scientific, but or Hawaii Biotech. But I view technological development in a broad community as a continuum. Mm-hmm. It requires great ideas, and the university has great ideas, and so there's no doubt about that. The second component is we need great entrepreneurs. Right in Hawaii right now, that entrepreneurial activity is very, very low, and the number of seasoned entrepreneurs is low because many of them have already gone to California and built their companies in California. We do every once in a while get people coming back, mm-hmm. And so we do have a cadre of potential managers for these companies. The third piece is we need entrepreneurial training. And we have at the University of Hawaii now an Accelerate UH program, and we have a number, I think the last time I looked is 4 or 5 accelerators, like the Energy Accelerator, Blue Startups in our community. And those are filling a niche as well. The general problem though is we don't have a small $30 to $35 million venture fund that is very careful and is very credible on the mainland. And that's what my funds HMS did for a short period of time before other, I hate to say it, what I would call pretenders came into Hawaii and tried to build companies fast. And you can't build, in many cases you can't build companies fast. You have to take a very calculated, slow look at our community. If you think about it, Hawaii can probably produce 1, maybe 2 companies a year that have the potential of being great companies, at least $100 million in revenue. So we have to be careful about where we deploy our resources. In many cases, the stops and starts of our community have been based on trying to be too many things to too many people. And it made it almost, took the risk out of venture investing when they did tax incentives. And so then everybody jumped in the game, and you know, you get, when you have that kind of situation, you have a whole bunch of yo-yos jumping into the world. And not to say that I wasn't a yo-yo, but at least I tried to do it the sort of the West Coast way. Then you need the companies, the large companies, or actually more medium to large size companies that are willing to partner with Hawaii-based companies. So we have most of the pieces. We don't have the small venture fund. But it could be easily put together if the right people got behind it. And then we'd have incubation to commercialization continuum, and the pieces would be there, and we could help the community develop these businesses.
Yeah, what you were saying about you can't do these things too fast and they need some time, particularly the front end, really resonates with me. I've been involved in some much small scale projects on improving access to drinking water in the Pacific Islands, and I spent the first year of the project not trying really to do any projects there, but really just to build up the teams of the people who would eventually do the projects.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
that really has paid off. These people got to know each other, talk to each other, trust each other, work together, finally accomplish one small project together, and then it's like, oh, hey, we can do this. We can actually make a difference here. Now they're running off.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, the diversity of interests that are necessary to build this continuum will take time to put together.
Yeah, and particularly communities who have not traditionally worked together,
Right.
then they have to. You can't just sort of throw them in the same room and say, go produce.
It's
It's
almost a cultural thing because we have to overcome the fear of failure.
Right.
And with an Asian community like ours, I'm not sure my father ever thought I was a success.
Yeah, so they're very, very different, and yes, the idea of working across different sort of cultures who have different, often unstated values and ways of doing things just adds another layer of complexity. I mean, it's one thing if you're from, say, the Midwest and everyone more or less has the same background there, then it's a little easier to walk, but you've got not only the different industry, different field kind of differences and language differences that we spoke of earlier, but then with underlying some cultural differences, it makes it even more complicated.
Well, I mean, can you imagine the thought process that's going through a Kamehameha School trustee if they fail in Honolulu as opposed to if they fail in Michigan?
Right.
So it's an interesting dynamic that we have here in Hawaii.
Yeah. The pushes. So what could be done, do you think, sort of on a larger scale perhaps, to really to fill in those gaps in the continuum, to really put the pieces in place? Does this require more state control, less bureaucratic interference?
Well, I mean, entrepreneurship generally should be a private sector effort. I think there's always ways where the government can help, but in most cases, it's going to take the private sector coming together, releasing control, letting people fail, and bringing the capital base that should be in Hawaii back in Hawaii. And if you think about it, and I used to think about this from a theoretical standpoint, when the Bishop Estate sold all of its household lots under the mandatory conversion laws, say there are 100,000 people that had homes that were leases, and they had to spend about $100,000 on average for each of the lots that they wanted to buy back from the estate. So you have 100,000 times 100,000. That's 10 million. That's a big chunk of money.
Right.
And it all disappeared as investments into the mainland. So the capital base of Hawaii has always been hampered by the situation where the capital base was all land and not cash. And so if you suck all that cash out of a community like Hawaii is, you don't have that play cash that people spend in entrepreneurial companies. And so I think that's one of the biggest issues is we have to get the controllers of large pools of capital in Hawaii to start reinvesting in Hawaii, and not just in real estate projects, but in business creation.
Yeah. It certainly seems like there is a lot of current investment going into real estate projects.
Absolutely. There's lots of cash here.
Right.
It's not that we have a lack of money, it's that we have a lack of direction into entrepreneurship.
Right. Again, there's not, it's one of these almost vicious circles, right, where there haven't been a lot of tech successes out of Hawaii, and therefore people sort of don't.
And people make money in real estate projects, so why wouldn't they do it again?
Right, exactly.
But then we get these swings.
Yeah. Well, and plus you get this.
You get this foreign ownership situation.
Right. Yeah. This overdevelopment too. Yeah. That's a little frightening. So, since you work at university, I always come back to talking about the students. How would you? What advice would you give to students who might be interested in developing their own business, starting their own company, taking off on that world?
There's an interesting phenomenon that I've noticed in entrepreneurship. Most entrepreneurs are either younger than 25 or older than 45. It's because of that risk-taking lifestyle between 25 and 45 is really dampened down because of the mortgages, the kids, the private schools, you name it. So what I would say to the young students, and I do this, is while you're young, while you're living at home, while you're gonna get your ramen for free from dad, go out and try. I don't even care if you fail, because you will learn far more about yourself and about your life in those 2 or 3 years that you're being an entrepreneur than anything else you'll ever do in your life. So why not do it? You know, I had a similar experience. I came back from law school, and you know, my dad was the Chief Justice, and I looked at him and said, Dad, you know, I don't want to be a lawyer. And so I took a sales job at Wang Computers. And then I came back to the law, excuse me, but it was those 5 or 6 years that I did as a salesman that really made a difference for me.
Okay. Yeah, and it's funny. Some years ago I was talking to Dean Kamen, you know, and he told the story about when he was in college, and he developed this funny idea about using essentially a motor to run a screw to drive a syringe, basically.
Interesting.
And
I didn't know
developed
that about him.
the first syringe pumps, and started building these things and sold them to the regional hospitals, and they went like hotcakes, basically. So he got so busy doing it that he flunked out of college.
Ed Cadman's a very smart guy.
But yes, he had patented these and made enough money that he later was actually able apparently to hire back some of the same professors who had flunked him out.
I didn't know that.
To work for him.
That's a great story.
Yeah, so but it's risk taking. It's what you're saying, being willing to really push it all the way to the limit. But he was doing this basically in his parents' garage, apparently when he was in college. So that's how you got to do it. It's interesting. I had not heard of that sort of, you're saying it's almost a dip in risk taking from the late 20s or mid 20s on to the mid 40s before you feel free enough again.
Yep.
Huh, probably not universal, but
Probably not universal, but it seems to be a fairly common situation, at least for my venture fund.
Well, excellent. Well, this is great. This has been a very informative, enlightening talk, and certainly learned a lot about how we make science impact people's lives and how it gets out there and gets spread around the world. And so I've certainly enjoyed this. Thank you very much for coming on by.
Thank you.
And I look forward to future conversations then.
Appreciate it.
Aloha.
Aloha.
You're here on Likeable Science. I'm your host, Ethan Allen. With me today has been Bill Richardson from Tech Transfer, and we'll be back next week.
Hello, everybody. I'm IC Davidson. Thanks for tuning in to Think Tech Hawaii. One of the things that we do here, or the thing that we do here, is promote civic engagement in Hawaii. What does that mean? We want to talk about things that people want to hear about, and we want you to engage us and be part of that conversation. One of the ways that you can do that is by joining in during our live show via Twitter. How do you do that? Well, you get on the interwebs and get Twitter, get an account, and mention us if you have a question. What you'll do is you tune into our show live, tweet us questions, and our hosts and guests will address them accordingly. It's really easy, it's really fun, and I think that your participation in what we're doing here will help us continue the dialogue on very important issues that we're trying to cover. Sustainability, clean energy, you name it, we're on top of it. We want you to be part of what we're doing, because together we'll be able to make things change. Thank you for watching. Think Tech Hawaii, thinktechhawaii.com, weekdays 12 to 5 p.m.